Afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'll introduce the members of the panel. To my far left is Mr. Richard Whitbread. To my immediate left is Mr. Mark Boreski. My name is Stu McPherson. I'll be chairing the hearing. The assessor for today is Mr. Rob Lucky, and the secretary for today's hearing is Ms. Kelsey Harrison. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We'll limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons and assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council. It's independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they so wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave and the process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. Just as information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. If you have a cell phone, please put that on silent, and I'll have you swear the parties.
Do you swear in? Could you please state your name?
Robert Allen Lucky.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You go first, right? No. Oh, you swear, sorry. Could you please state your name?
Trevor Smith.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Afternoon, Mr. Smith. We're here representing the owners of 8 properties, and it's the amount of assessed value only that we're dealing with today?
That's correct.
Thank you. We'll just deal with them as they're listed on the docket today. So the first property we'll deal with is 500 Lindenwood Drive East. So when you're ready, Mr. Assessor, we'll hear from you. Please ensure you read in the file number and roll up in each case.
Thank you. First one is file number 19-932, roll number 10006446800. The address of the property is 500 Lindenwood Drive. This property is a life lease property. It's 4 stories, masonry building. It was built in 2010. There's 48 suites. There's underground parking. And I was actually in this building. I put it on the roll when it was new. Excuse me. We'll go through a lot more detail on it further, but the summary is we're using an average market rent of $1,653. That's the total income divided by the suites, so that includes parking and any other incidental income as well as the rent. The rent we deem to be not market because the people buy down the rent with a significant participation fee. And some are as high as like over $300,000. So basically what they're paying is expenses, taxes, cost to run the building, not market rent. And we've used model expenses, and a cap rate for this age and style of buildings 5%. Page 4, I've used some comparable rental properties. Number 1, Gateway, that's actually a life lease as well. So again, there's a significant down payment or participation fee as well as rent. Sterling Lion is a typical rental apartment building, as well as 7 Bison and 100 Paget is a rental apartment. Anyway, when we first started doing these, we didn't have rentals as high as this quality of building, but they're coming on stream on a regular basis now, so market rent is somewhat easy for us to establish. I've got all the pages numbered at the bottom right-hand corner. And I'd like to take you to page 15. Page 15 and page 16 are examples, and 18. These are examples of units in the building that were put on MLS. And the important distinction to make is that for the first example, the list price was $219,900. Now, when these properties sell, the people still have to pay the participation fee on top of that, which we'll get to later on in the brief. So this is just, they're selling their interest in the property for page 15 was 219, page 16 was 271, and page 18 was 209, and these are all old sales, so there's no post reference. Now, when we get to page 22, this starts describing the property. It's a Mennonite seniors group that has, there's actually 4 complexes right on Lindenwood Drive, just before it hits Kenniston. So this building is behind the Safeway on Kenniston, if you're familiar with that. And then there's another life lease across the street, and then there's an assisted living behind this one, and there's assisted living and care home next to the other one. So there's 4 seniors properties right there. Sort of a full service. On page 28, we start showing the layouts of these suites. And page 28, it shows, they're all 2 bedrooms, but they all vary in size. So this is the second largest one. There's 8 units, that's 457 square feet. And page 29, there's 1173. And then there's 4 small units on page 30, which are 938 square feet. And then there's 6 units on page 31. It shows 1,460 square feet. Page 32 is 1,385 square feet. So for the most part, they're all large two-bedroom condo units, and they all have underground heated parking. Page 33, it's kind of hard to read, but there's a couple columns, and it shows the minimum in the dark, kind of blurry one, shows the minimum participation fee is, goes, I think, at about 100,000 up to 172. So the one at 170, actually 177, if you were to put that down, your rent would be 1,482. However, you could also choose to put down 354,000, and then your rent would get bought down to 484. So that's why I'm saying it, when you look at the rent roll, it really doesn't, it's not market rent, because the people are putting down substantial amounts of money. On top of that, like I showed, some of them are selling on MLS. People are paying the 200,000 and then having to pay this on top of that. So they're quite, it's a luxurious place, there's no doubt. I think that's all I have to say on that.
Did you give us your evaluation? Did you go over that?
Oh, sorry, I guess on the page 3, the total value, the total assessment is $12,147,000, which is roughly $253,000 a year.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions for the assessor?
Yes, just a few. So the city and ourselves, we're in agreement that the in-place rental charges for the property are not appropriate for use in valuing the property. They would produce too low a value, correct?
Right, in most cases, it's almost like a condo common element fee. If the unit's bought down completely, then you're
Right.
paying the common element charges.
Right, so we're both disregarding, both parties are disregarding the in-place revenue charges,
Right.
correct? Okay. And, pardon me, the ownership structure of the subject property, can you tell the board what that is? A fee simple,
It's divided up as a condo. There's separate titles for each unit. And when I inspected it, it was explained to me that the titles are held by the group. But it's a representation of of each individual unit, and it's how they carve off all the expenses by the percentage ownership of each unit.
right, so the ownership is held under one single entity, and that's the Lindenwood Villa Inc., the nonprofit organization, holds title to all of the condominium units, correct? And the life
The actual
lease,
titles, I believe that's how it works.
that is correct, yes. And the life lease tenants have a tenancy agreement. They have a lease on the unit that they're in, correct?
The way it was
That's the
explained,
structure.
they're all different, but all the projects are different, but the way it was explained to me is they have like a leasehold interest, they have a share in their unit.
They have a leasehold interest in their unit, yes, but they don't own the property in any sense.
Well, they can sell their shares on MLS.
They individually can sell their shares on MLS.
Right.
So the property is held by a single entity, and I know that in other instances in city of Winnipeg where it's a standard market apartment and the owner has gone through the exercise of making it a condominium ownership, but they retain all of the ownership of all of the units, it's still valued as a market apartment, correct? As we are valuing the subject property, it's not meant to be valued as condominiums, correct?
No, we value them as apartments.
Okay. Just quickly looking at the properties on page number 4, so the rental comparables there. You had mentioned 1845 Gateway, that's a life lease facility, so that rental, that would be their internal rental charge, so again, we wouldn't place any reliance on that.
Market would most likely be higher, yeah.
It would be different in any case, correct? If this is a life lease, then we're not relying on their in-place revenue. Moving on from that one then, 100 Paget Street, this is a Crystal Properties property. I was just reviewing it before we came here, and it appeared to be of a higher standard than the subject. Quartz countertops, nicer flooring, stainless steel appliances, etc. Would that one tend to drive higher rents in the marketplace?
The 100 Paget has, I believe it has 3-bedroom units, and it has 1-bedroom units and 2-bedroom units. But the rentals, the rent amount of the comparables typically don't include parking, which for the subject, our income includes parking. 100 Paget, some may prefer it to this one, some would prefer this one to Paget. I wouldn't think that there's a giant difference. The subject has big suites. I don't know how. It would look like the suites are smaller in Paget than the subject.
Mr. Chair, may I interrupt? Can I clarify something? Because we're going down the wrong path here.
Okay,
The evidence provided by or the question provided by the applicant is regarding 65 Paget, not 100 Paget. And I can only speak to this because I live in 100 Paget. 100 Paget is the older building, 65 Paget is the newer building. You're correct about stainless quartz. The 100 Paget property does not have any of those amenities. It's an older building, not quite as enriched as 65 Paget.
Okay.
The space is about the same, the rent is correct. So just want to clarify before they go down this path that we're
So-
left hanging.
Certainly, thank you for putting that out there. I did a search just this morning for this particular property, 100 Paget, and this is the information that it brought up, that they had photos and they described the units and it was quartz, so if that information was incorrect, then that
They're
was-
stainless, but no
And this
quartz
is,
or
this is the
hardwood.
building that was built in 2011?
Yes. The newest one, the 65, which you may be referring to, is built 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's the assisted living.
No,
And that's, it's 85 and 95 that you're thinking of.
it's a Crystal Properties.
Oh,
Where
Crystal
are we?
Belt.
Right beside it, yeah.
Well, thank you for the information, I certainly wasn't meaning
It's
to mislead.
confusing,
It
there's
was-
too many buildings
Yeah.
on
it was the-
budget.
Because you're right, the new one is smaller, the rents are higher.
And that's
it has-
65.
Yeah, and it has laminate flooring, quartz, countertops, etc.
Okay,
In any event,
yeah,
Sorry.
we can move on from there. I have no further questions, really. Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Whitbread,
Just have one for clarification. I note in the ads you produced somewhere in your document, evidence, I think it's the sale ads, they talk about built in 203, and you're talking about a 2010 built. Did you note that? Or did I read it wrong?
What's the role?
Hmm? I'll find it.
Right, one says
I
04,
think two of them say, or one says 203,
and one says 03.
Mhm.
Oh, you know what, sorry. So,
Mhm.
03 is 495 across the street. It's the sister building to 500. Like the one we're doing, this is the 495, good catch, is the sister building. It's a bit more modest, it's across the street. And it has a mixture of, well, it's more modest. 495.
sorry, you're saying these ads are for 495?
Well, some are, they're for both. So
There's
the
500 of them.
the first, the first one on page 15 is 103 500 Lindenwood. That's the subject building, and it's 2010.
Is that on the south side of Lindenwood?
Exactly,
And on the north side is the other building?
495.
And that's owned by the Mennonite.
Yeah, all four buildings are owned, and there's a fifth building that's condos, that's something else. But there's four buildings, and 500 is on the south side, 495 is on the north side of Lindenwood, right at the end, just before you run into the shopping.
But both of these ads say 500 Lindenwood.
The first two, and then the third one,
But the first two have different year build dates.
well, that's wrong. 500 Lindenwood was built in 2010. So the listing agent put the wrong date. She probably got the two buildings confused. She does the marketing for both. And then on 18 is 495 Lindenwood, and that's correct. That's 2003 or 4, depending when you count.
So that's at 490.
95. 490 is behind 500, which is assisted living.
Okay.
So the two life lease buildings are at 500 and 495.
So you're saying 500 is built in 203?
10,
Oh, it says 203.
That's wrong.
Oh, okay.
yeah. I started at the city at '09, and then I put it on about a year later.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Okay.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Bresky?
On the ownership. So it is a condominium plan.
Right,
All units, all titles held by the nonprofit corporation. Each occupant purchases a leasehold interest? Is that what is being advertised, say, in the Remax advertisements here?
well, whatever the technical term is, I'm not sure. But the way that I explain it, or the way I've had it explained to me, is you're buying interest in this building, or you're buying the unit but not getting title. It's not like when you buy a condo, you buy it, they give you the title. This one, you're buying shares.
Do they have a registered leasehold interest on the title?
I don't know, I haven't searched the title.
So,
There's some kind of agreement, I've never seen one.
so somebody is going to pay $219,900 as advertised by Remax, and is gonna pay that to whom? The occupant
Right.
in order to acquire the lease, or to the nonprofit corporation?
They pay, and I asked the manager 3 times, cause I couldn't believe it. But if that was your unit and you put it on the market, I would pay you the $219,000, and then I would have to go and pay for the share, the admission fee of anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000+.
Which is really just a buy down of the rent, which would be
It's
very
sure.
high otherwise.
Right.
Okay.
These types of buildings were started in the 90s because there wasn't deluxe apartments. So you had all these people retiring, selling their houses, and they had cash, and they wanted a nice place to live. So and I was involved with housing, because I worked for Crown Lands at the time, in drawing up legislation. Because at first it was sort of a free-for-all, and there's tons of different arrangements with all these different groups. But some projects you can't sell your unit, you get your shares back and that's it. Other ones, you can sell your unit, and then then your shares come back to you, and then the people have to put the shares back in. Other buildings, it's both.
Okay.
Half of them are one and half of them are the other. That's why it's very confusing.
Okay, a couple more questions. One being, are you familiar with the leasehold interests being commonly listed on MLS?
I've seen them on MLS, but often they're taken off, because they don't actually transfer on MLS. They're marketed.
So the value that you have come up with is working back from the income, did you say?
The only way that they make sense, and the way that we're supposed to look at them, is they're typical rental apartments. So we put market rent on them, and I've showed you some examples of market rent of other buildings that are typical apartments. And we use market expenses, market cap rates. So our value of 250,
Three. Okay.
253 per unit is to represent a typical rental apartment.
And so there's no relationship between that and the market value of the leasehold interest or the rent, which may be bought down by varying amounts.
Right.
Okay. I think I understand.
Thank you.
It's not for- And every one of these projects is different, that's what makes it worse. You know, they all have different setups.
You mentioned that this is part of a cluster where it's all a senior type complex. Is this a 55 plus?
Right.
It is? And does that affect the market value that's been placed on the property?
Well, it looks like it's affected it in a good way. You know, there's,
No, but I mean the model that's generated this 1653.
no, these, the only one that's 55 plus is number 1 on Gateway. And that rental, is most likely just our market rent that's been applied to it.
That's
Because-
not an actual what they're receiving.
Not necessarily. It may or may not be, I don't know. But 2, 3, and 4 are market apartment blocks in the subject area, roughly.
Okay, and I see that the construction of the subject is reinforced concrete frame.
Right.
Does that affect the value versus wood or steel stud?
Oh, absolutely. Like, 2 and 3 are wood frame.
Right, so there would be a higher value attributed to the
Well, there-
reinforced concrete?
Yeah, they're so much quieter. Like wood frame, it doesn't matter what you do to them, you can hear your neighbors. Concrete deadens the sound.
I have another question when you're done, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, your cap rate of 5%, where does that fall? In your capitalization?
That's our rate for newer buildings. I don't know if this is useful, but there was a decision on 495 across the street, it was 5.25.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Whitburn, do you have a follow-up question?
I think I followed Mr. Bretsky's line of thinking and your responses, but I'm looking at your page 33. And if I understand this correctly, if I pay on the top line, 101, suite number 101, if I paid $124,500 to the organization,
Right.
my base monthly charge would be $11.93. Is that correct?
Right.
And the $390 adjusted monthly charge, is that if I pay the $249,000?
Right.
So if I didn't, I guess I can't give in if I don't pay the $124,500. Because it's a minimum required. I couldn't say,
Well, that's one of the lower suites.
but
Like-
it doesn't matter which one it is.
Yeah, right.
Let's just deal with the concept.
Yeah, you wouldn't get in there unless you came up with minimum
Right.
for there is a couple suites that you could get in there for $100,000.
So in, that rent is not a market rent, it should be higher, but I'm prepaying my rent, in
Right.
essence, is what it is.
Right.
So when you factor your net income into the calculation, I couldn't find a balance sheet in here, or an income statement, sorry. You factor that prepayment into the rent and the net operating income. 124,000 times 48 suites, is a heck of a lot of money. Does it somehow show up in the income statement for me
No,
to do this NOI with any degree of accuracy?
no.
Did you not get an income statement from this?
We did.
Did you? I couldn't find it, I'm sorry. You see what I'm getting at with respect to that 124,000 payment, prepaid rent? If you took that 124,000 and you multiplied it by 48 and then divided it by some element that allocated 12 monthly rental payments for X number of years, it surely would have an impact on this net operating income line.
Oh, absolutely.
But
I think I've run down that number. Like if you run down the maximum buyout and add them all up, you're getting towards the assessed value, just the participation fee.
yeah, but you couldn't do that rationally from my basic
Yeah.
understanding of accounting. You have, methodology, you have to sort of roll it over a number of months, years, and allocate that prepaid rent in some fashion. You don't appear to be doing that, and I don't see that done in this
The
statement.
difficulty is that we can't, first of all, we seldom know what the participation fee is. In this case, I went there and I inspected the building and I got this from them. In most instances, we don't even know what the people are putting down. So there's no way of making some accounting for the participation fee, how it applies to what the people are paying. So, I mean, well, whatever. In the past, I've done them on the other side, not assessment, but for the owner. And we said, you know, what's market rent? What would somebody pay market rent for in the area? We looked at that, and then we said, well, what's your cost for that money? If I had $100,000, what would I get for that? You know, like I'm giving it to them. Some places they pay you interest, some they don't. But I mean, you have a cost. If I had to come up with $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000, I'd have to pull it out of the bank, assuming I had it there. And there's a cost to that. But we can't figure all that out because these are all unknowns. So all we do is say, what's market rent?
Let me just stop you there for a moment.
Yeah.
May I just direct a real quick question to the applicant?
Mhm.
Mr. Smith, are you going to be able to answer that question if we get to your when we get to your evidence? Sorry.
I'm sorry, I was working on something else.
When I talked to him about the prepayment being included in the rent somehow. Did you hear me ask him that question?
I have the basic question, yes.
Will you be able to shed more light when we get to you?
I can give you my information on it,
Okay.
yes.
But maybe we can be satisfied with that, Mr. Chair, and come back and work this through
Yeah.
again if we need to.
Let me just have one final question here. This is a life lease. Are all the life leases treated the same way? They're all done
Yes.
on using a
Market rent.
model that uses market values?
We use market rent, market expenses, market cap rates on all of them. That's the only way that we can look at them all consistently.
Okay.
Other questions? Sure, you're done.
Yeah.
Then on the income and expense sheet that was provided to you, it shows total income is $409,337 on page 13.
Right.
What's being reported there? Is that the monthly charges, the total of monthly charges?
I believe so. I'm not sure, but it's, see, the thing is, we don't know how many people bought down the whole unit and how many people made the minimum payment. So the people that have made the minimum payment are paying more rent, if you want to call it that. Other people that bought down their whole unit are paying minimal.
Do you?
So that's the total of what people are.
Do you
paying.
use any of the information off of these income and expense sheets from life lease properties to determine your market?
We look
rents
at
and
the,
expenses?
we look at the expenses,
You look at the expenses?
right?
Okay.
And we gauge that, like, yeah, the expenses.
Okay. Did it?
We good, gentlemen?
Not
Good.
totally, but good. We may get there.
All right. Mr. Smith, hear from you, please.
Certainly, so I guess I'd like to start with regard to the structure of the valuation itself and just be very clear about this as we seem to be having an extreme focus on the life lease aspect that's been presented. We're looking at the market value for the subject property, and that's our task here today. And the means of doing that, both by the city and ourselves, is treating the property as a market rental apartment and applying appropriate rental rates, appropriate expenses, vacancy, appropriate cap rate to arrive at a fair market value for that.
Fee simple if I
Fee
may.
simple, correct, that's correct. So looking at the subject property here, it is a life lease facility. We're not looking at what a life lease tenant, because they are tenants, may or may not sell their individual life lease lease interest, not ownership, for on the marketplace. That's an entirely separate matter. The funding of their purchase of their life lease leasehold interest is also separate as well. So getting into the, and with all due respect, getting into the minutia of how that funding occurs, how much buy down there is, I don't want to say that it's irrelevant, but it's really not what we're valuing today. So if they pay $300 because they put a very large down payment down, that's obviously not market rent. If they put the minimum down and they pay a relatively high amount, that's also not strictly market rent. So we're not in any sense relying on that, as is the city. So the advertising, because I don't think any of those sheets that were included were truly final transactions. They were simply advertised prices. Again, that is the tenant advertising their leasehold interest for sale, that they would then, they themselves as the tenant would receive any benefit from that. It's not the ownership of the property. As I had stated earlier in one of my questions, when a market apartment owner has created a condominium plan structure for their ownership of a market apartment and retained ownership of all of the units, it's valued as a standard market apartment as by the city and by ourselves. This is the same structure. So just so that we're starting from that basis, I wanted to make that clear.
Thank you for that.
With regard to the subject property, as mentioned already, it is developed by the nonprofit organization Winnipeg Mennonite Seniors Care, Inc. They have 4 properties in this immediate vicinity, 475 through 500 Linden Woods. 2 of them are assisted living centers, and 2 of them are life lease centers. We have had the sister property of this one, 495 Linden Woods, already before this board in this cycle, and the decision on that property was based on a 5.25% capitalization rate. We disagreed with the final value, and we've appealed that onwards to the municipal board, and we'll await scheduling of that hearing in due time. Just for kind of round numbers sake, when we look at the city's overall assessed value for the subject property, it comes to $253,062 a suite. We do not see that transacting on the marketplace. In fact, if you look at the sale of the most modern building that has recently transacted, which is 333 Ward, which sold in 2016, built in 2006, 103 suites, transacted for $18 million. The price per suite for 333 Ward comes to $174,757 per suite.
Where is this?
I'm speaking to information that will be presented. It's not specifically in this particular brief, but you'll see it 7 more times today. So looking at 333 Ward, again, transacted in 2016, built in 2006, 18 million was the sale price, 103 units, comes to roughly $175,000 per suite. Our valuation of the subject property comes to $177,458 per suite. So roughly similar. Just from a overhead view of the subject valuation. So let's move on to the subject property itself. 500 Linden Woods, again owned by a nonprofit organization. They did develop it as 55 plus seniors residence, and it is operated as a life lease facility. There are 48 2-bedroom units in the property, and it is concrete and steel frame construction. The photographs of the exterior and interior begin on page number 4. You can see the development of the property. It is good quality, it's well maintained, It is not, they're not small units, certainly, but I would not necessarily say that they would be of the same finish level perhaps of some more modern apartments that are out there, if you look at the kitchens and the flooring, et cetera. They're certainly nice, but they're not luxury standard. If you move on to page number 8, there's further description of the property itself. I'll leave that for you to review if you wish. There is underground parking for the subject property, as well as a little bit of surface parking as well. The site itself is in that Linden Woods area. If you look at my page number 10, you can see the general location of it there from the red dot in southwest Winnipeg. And that will help you orient yourself to it. We can move on from there to the evaluation itself. Pardon me. Page number 11 has a little bit of detail with regard to vacancy rates in seniors housing in both Winnipeg and Manitoba. If you look at the the vacancy rates there, it gives you an indication of what vacancies are for seniors housing overall. That takes into account all categories of seniors housing, both life lease, assisted living, etc. Moving on to my page number 12 and our estimate of value by the income approach. So we've stated the actual rental charges for the subject property in the middle of the page. You can, as we've already acknowledged, they are on the low side and wouldn't support a fair value for the subject property. So we're not relying on those in any sense in our valuation. Rental charges range between $554 and $1,264 for the subject property as of the valuation date. So our task is to come up with a fair rental value for the subject property. So what we have done is, as the city has, look at newly constructed, recently constructed market apartments that we believe are similar to the subject property, look at their rental rates in comparison to the subject, and arrive at a fair rent for the subject property. So looking at page 13, we have 4 properties there, all of them recently constructed. The first one on Sterling Lion Parkway is, I believe this might even be in the city's evidence, this is the spot at Tuxedo Point. So just on that, in that same area, more recently built, 2-bedroom rents at $1,645, high quality of finish, quartz countertops, in-suite laundry, stainless steel appliances, etc. This would be a higher level of finish than the subject. Number 2, Lumen Tower, 80 Barnes Street. You have rents between $1,375 and $1,500 a month at that location. Again, newly constructed apartment-style condos rented out privately in that location close to the U of M. Good quality finish. We have number 3, 225 Northtown Road. This is Bridgewater Heights, so very new construction. This is a modern market apartment, and we have rents there at $1,368 per month. Then we have finally 2815 Pembina Highway, which is the spot on Pembina Highway. Also relatively new construction, quite recent, certainly more recent than the subject, located just off of Pembina with luxury finishes throughout. So we have a range of rental rates for 2 beds of $1,368 to $1,645, and the average being $1,469. If you flip to page number 14, you can see a photograph of each of those comps. Give you an indication of the properties that we've used in our analysis. We believe that the subject property rents, internal rents, are below market. We think the average of these 4 properties would certainly be appropriate for valuation of the subject. So we have used the average rent of $14.69, which gives us our gross rental income of $884,880. Moving on to the expenses. The Winnipeg CMA overall vacancy rate was 2.9%. We have deferred to the city's 2.4% vacancy analysis in our vacancy rate in our analysis. With regard to the expenses, we've gone through our normal stabilization process of the 3 prior year expense history for the subject property. You can see that in the chart on page number 15. We have the years running between 2015 and 2017 with a stabilization for the valuation date. We arrive at a total expense amount of $337,592. And moving on from there to capitalization rate. So we've come to a fair net operating income at this point, and now we need to capitalize that income. If we look at my page number 16, there's some text at the top with regard to affordable housing, etc. This is not affordable housing, so I would simply ask you not to pay a lot of attention to that first paragraph. That probably should have been taken out prior to printing this, so please don't pay attention to that aspect. However, looking at the valuation of seniors' properties specifically, if you look at the bottom of page 16, we refer to an article in the Canadian Property Valuation magazine entitled Valuation of Seniors Housing. The graph at the bottom of the page gives you an indication of the premium with regard to cap rate placed on seniors housing in the Canadian market as a whole. Now, this was put out by C.B. Richard Ellis. The information is slightly older, however, the point of the presentation is not the actual cap rates that are shown, but the delta between seniors housing versus standard market apartments. So if you look at the dark green line at the bottom, the lowest cap rates, that would be your apartment high-rise A, as it shows, with the various categories of seniors housing falling above that. So there is a premium that is placed by investors in the marketplace on seniors housing. I believe that article has also been included in our addenda. If we look at the top of page number 17, C.B. Richard Ellis also did a study entitled Seniors Housing and Healthcare Canadian Cap Rate Survey in 2015, covering the major Canadian markets. And the question that they asked to the most active seniors housing market participants in Canada was, what cap rate would you use to value a Class A independent and assisted living community in each of Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, and Montreal, assuming the property was stabilized and it was a clean deal? As you can see, the results are shown in the chart below that, with average cap rates being in that range of 6.5% to slightly over 7%. Now, they're specifically referring to independent and assisted living communities in that question. However, as you see in the chart beforehand, seniors properties as a whole do tend to receive a premium to a base level of market apartment in their valuation. Beyond that, as we've all seen, I've included the Colliers and C.B. Richard Ellis capitalization rate information for both the 2016 and 2018 information. They don't specifically deal with seniors housing, however, they do have cap rate ranges for investment grade properties of both low-rise and high-rise. The Collier's information in 2016 and 2018 is shown on page number 17, and it gives you essentially a range for low-rise apartments between 5.25% and 6% in 2016, 5 to 6% in 2018, so relatively stable. We look at, with the low end being 5%. If we look at page number 18, the CD Richard Ellis information is presented in there. Cap rate ranges for low-rise A would be 5.5 to 6%. The CBRE information carries forward on 19. And you can see that they're looking at a stable trend line with regard to apartment cap rates in the top right-hand corner chart from kind of 2014 onward. Very stable cap rates. Looking at the subject property, it is good quality. It's not a standard market apartment, so there would be, obviously there would be some issues with regard to the tenants that are in place. They have valid life leases that would carry forward for the term of their life presumably, or until they decide to move out. That would complicate the property from an investment point of view in acquiring it. You have the structure that they are in place on. They, again, would be able to carry forward legally under that same structure. So this is not a straight transaction in the marketplace, and it would receive a premium. So the capitalization rate that we have applied to the subject is 5.75%. As you can see from the information presented, we're not at the upper end of the range. I think we're being very fair in using a cap rate of 5.75 based on that information. Page number 20 gives you a summary of this information. Compares our valuation to the City of Winnipeg's 2020 and 2018 valuations for the subject. So you can see our valuation, our final market value comes down to $8,518,000. Interesting information beside that, if you look at the City of Winnipeg's 2020 and 2018 valuations, they have adjusted their rent for the subject property from $14.94 in 2018 to $16.53 for 2020. Significant jump of over $100 as well. Yes, over $100 per suite per month. And the change in assessed value jumps from 10.6 million roughly to 12,147,000. So dramatic rise in assessed value for the subject between the 2018 and 2020 cycles. Again, we don't see this being supported in the marketplace. The most recent large transaction of a relatively recently constructed property lends support to our final market value that we arrive at. The addenda is there for you to view when you wish, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Lucky, questions for the applicants?
Yeah, I have this rebuttal.
What are you rebutting?
It's regarding income, rent.
Would you show that to the applicant first, please?
Sure.
These are rebutting his comparables? Is that?
Yeah.
nothing post-reference or anything to jump
I'm
to.
just checking. There's a reference to 70 Bison Drive here, which I don't have included in my information. That's,
But it's your information.
it's not my information. I have nothing here with regard to 70 Bison Drive.
Yeah, 70 Bison Drive is not in his information.
I don't object to the rest of it, but 70 Bison Drive is not.
Well, the point of 70 Bison Drive is you represented the property and it supports our rent and you didn't use it.
It's because it didn't, it wasn't an appropriate reflection of the subject property, we didn't feel. And it's not in question today.
You can bring that up in your questioning,
I
if you so wish,
think
but,
it's in your information, if I'm not mistaken.
but
So,
you can use that with the
Okay.
exception, we're gonna disregard the information
Can you
regarding.
keep that one? 'Cause
70
it doesn't
Bison?
have page numbers.
Yeah.
And then give out these three to the page numbers. Thanks.
Okay. What pages are those, Mr. Smith, that you are objecting to? 7,
I guess
Page,
it's 6, 7, and 8,
6, 7, 8?
yeah.
Okay.
Right, it's covered in mine, I guess. Okay, your rental comparables on page 13 of your brief. The page 3 of my rebuttal shows that in the ads, the two bedrooms range from 1645 to 1735. So did you just use the low end of the range?
No, we had been involved in valuation of the property at the development stage, and 1645 was the stated rate at that time. So that was the information that we had.
Are you going to treat your rebuttal as part of the questioning process then?
Right.
Rather than speak to it?
I think he needs to speak to it first, and then I'm
Well, I'm
supposed to
asking you
question.
questions about your rentals, and they're tied in to my rebuttal.
Okay.
Asking questions. So the question was,
Well, you're.
the range,
You're
the
questioning
range.
me on your information, so I just want to be clear with regard to the process and follow the proper rules. I'm happy to answer questions, I'm not disputing that.
Right.
I'm simply not going to get grilled on information that I didn't present.
Okay, so where did you get the 1645 from? You said,
Well, before you do that, let's go through your rebuttal.
okay,
So, not putting words in your mouth, but I think page 3, your point is that there was a advertised range.
there is an advertised range in 2017 of 1645 to 1735.
Okay, you can go through the rest, and then Mr. Smith will have an opportunity
Page
to address
4
anything that you're presenting.
is their return, and the average overall, we were told by the owners, is 1670. Page 5, we couldn't find any rents on this because it was actually a condominium project, as stated. But I noted, based on the MLS sales, that these units were selling for between $256 and $315 per unit, which supports our assessment. Mr. Smith objected to a building that he represented me using, and the final is just a picture of the Pembina, 2815 Pembina.
Smith, did you have any comments regarding this rebuttal evidence?
Yeah, just briefly, and again, I guess we've already spoken to it, so the 785 Sterling Lion, again, we had been involved, our company, not myself, had been involved with valuation work for the owner at the development stage, and the stated rental rates were $16.45 at that time. So if they had changed since that time, I did not have access to that information. We don't manage the property, so I do not have access to the income and expense information that they may have submitted to the property. I see that the average is $16.70 a month. I don't dispute that. That's fine. The information that we have presented is not misleading, is the point that I'm getting at. As we move forward, 80 Barnes, if you look at my material on page number 13, it states that it's condominiums, apartment-style condos, where they are rented out. This is Lumen Tower. They're all rented out, is my understanding. It's run as a rental property, and it is in that southwest area as well. I guess the last one is simply a picture of the Pembina Highway spot. That's fine. That's my comments.
So now I'd like to ask you questions.
Before you do that, I just want to see if the panel had any questions regarding the rebuttal. Mr. Whitbeck?
No, thank you.
Mr. Brodsky?
Dates. Your page 3, you've written the 2017 on it, but otherwise we don't see what date this is from. Is that correct?
Yeah, this would have been when we put it on, so it would have been 16, 17.
Page 4, is there a date for this information?
I think the bottom has it.
You can actually see the part that's been redacted.
It appears to be a post reference.
How do I know whether it is or it isn't?
Well, I'm looking under the black highlighter. The range is.
Oh, okay,
December
no,
31,
sorry, this is,
2018.
you're right, this is 18. This is the first return that we got, right.
So this is actually post-reference.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, this would be post-reference. The page 3 is 17.
The date on page 5.
These are sales,
Individual dates as listed in the table. And
the
as,
sales run from 2015 up to 19, but, so you could disregard the top half. But 15 to, so the top 3 would be post-reference. I did all the, I printed all the 2-bedroom sales.
that's all my questions.
Okay, you may continue with your question of the applicant.
Okay, your comparable one, Sterling Line Parkway, is 1645. That's without parking?
That would be without parking, yes.
So you would have to add, I would assume people would have cars there, so you'd have to add either 60 or 147 to be reflective of our total income number?
You could add an amount for parking. The subject property has, does have underground parking, minimal surface parking, and it's included in what they're paying, but there's a bit of parking income there.
Okay. So it would be higher than that, including parking. And then number 2, they're condos, but these units, you put range from 884 square feet to 1,057. Aren't the subject units drastically larger than that?
Not necessarily drastically, there's a range in size, but they are larger than that range. These are nice quality condos, built as condos as stated. And they have good finishes, and it's a more recent build than the subject. But you're right, they are a little smaller than the subject.
Same thing as North Town, they're smaller.
955, yes.
And then the last one, Pembina Highway, the spot, same thing, like the range is 890. And there's 4 units that are 938 square feet, and all the rest of the subjects are much larger than that. So again, they would be larger than these.
They would be larger than that range, yeah. I think the 11, I forget if I have, the figure is 11.
Well, they go up to 1460.
There are a few at the large size, yes. I don't have wasn't looking at the breakdown, but yes, your point is they are smaller.
I got that for you.
I think my page number 8 gives you the breakdown of the particular types by unit type. In any case, I'm not disputing that the size of the comparable units is smaller than the subject.
So then, in your income approach on page 20, you've included the your 1469, which is without parking, and you've only added in $1,500 for parking. So that would mean that only one person has a car?
The parking income that I've included there was the actual parking revenue that they collected as they include parking with units. Theoretically, I mean, there's a variety in the market. Yes, there could perhaps be more parking revenue than that in a normal situation.
No further questions?
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
First, I'd just like to apologize to Mr. Smith if there's anything I said or we said that lead you to believe that we are interested in the minutiae here. We are not. I'm looking at a difference in assessed value in your calculations of about $3.5 million. I'm looking at an NOI differential of about $117,500, and I'm looking at about $6 million in prepaid rent is the only way I can characterize it, and trying to understand how that comes into play in these calculations. So no intent to get at the minutiae, much intent in getting at the big value numbers here. I'm not satisfied that I have an explanation for that. I don't think you can provide that, how that $600 or $6 million in prepay comes into play. Now, I think maybe I'll just leave it with that, I won't bother with the question.
Mr. Perez?
You gave us charts and evidence that seniors' housing commands a higher cap rate than general apartments do. But why? Why is that a riskier investment?
I didn't go into detail in reading through the article there necessarily, but there is, there's a greater degree of turnover. The high end of the range as far as risk goes is the assisted and independent living, where you have a business component which is included. Now, we're not dealing with that today specifically, as this is not an assisted or independent living facility, and there is no business component. It's simply a life lease facility that we're treating as a standard market apartment. The issue with regard to seniors housing is that you have you've already narrowed your market to specifically seniors. So if you're 55 plus or 60 or whatever the number is, that's your market segment. You can't rent below that to anybody else. We do have an aging population, but that obviously changes over time as well. So going forward, if you are 55 plus, your cohort is narrowed down. You also have obviously end of life issues where people come and go perhaps more frequently than in more normal market apartments of the same classification, so the upper end. If you're renting a high-end apartment,
You
you
said
have the
perhaps, is
wherewithal.
that speculation or do you have data
I don't have the data to show you with regard to that.
as opposed to how frequently people under 55 move around for new jobs, new locations? Is it-
Well, there is obviously movement in that market segment as well, there's no question about that. But the information that is included there with regard to valuation of seniors housing is that in the marketplace, higher cap rates are attributed to them versus standard market apartments.
And that data, that covers all forms of senior housing? It's not exclusive to life leases, am I correct?
It's not exclusive to life leases, you're correct.
What part of the seniors housing market are life leases in gross percentage term?
I would not have that information, I'm afraid. To give you a breakdown, I don't want to speculate as to the size of that.
Okay, that's all.
A couple of quick ones here on page 15, which is your expense allowance. You've used property management, I guess that's an estimate, 5% of the effective gross. Did they not report a property management fee?
They did not, no.
Would there not have to be property management involved in this property?
Internally, yes, but they don't charge a specific property management fee, so we have.
So it would be part of the
normalized
non-profit.
That's correct, so we've stabilized the expenses to include that.
Okay, thank you. And then just on your comparables, 80 Barnes, where did those rents come from? You said that they were renting out privately. Where would you get access to that information? 1375 to 1500.
Through at Cushman Wakefield Stevenson, as part of our valuation group, we do a lot of valuations of market apartments and have to look for comparables, so our staff scours the market for appropriate.
Okay, so that was internal information.
Internal.
Thank you.
I'm just doing, if you'll permit me, I'm just doing a bit of a reworking here of my number to include some parking revenue. we've done is, as I recognize what Mr. Lecky was saying with regard to parking and the lack of recognition of it here. So what I've done is assign a single stall at $100 a month per suite, which would more than account for revenue for the subject property. We have 55 plus here. Not all of them are necessarily going to have cars. Most of them might, but we don't know that. So that gives us once I come to $56,025 in parking revenue, which gives us a gross potential income of $902,169. Vacancy allowance of $21,652. And effective gross income of $846,144. And if we deduct the expense allowance as it is, I mean, I could make the adjustment for the 5% management, it would go up slightly, but let's leave it as is. And use the $337,592 deducted from the effective gross gives us NOI of $508,552.
I don't think that's right.
If I may come to my final here, and I'll show you the numbers, we're free
Okay,
to all
sorry.
do it together, but I'm acknowledging the parking aspect here. Capped at 5.75 gives us a final market value of $8,844,000, inclusive of $100 a month for rent for one stall per unit. So, did you want those figures again there, Rob?
Sorry, so 48 units times 100 times 12 equals 56, or 57, 600.
So, I'll be clear here. So they had revenue of $1,575, which is an exterior, it's an extra stall for somebody. Not every individual occupies every stall in that underground, so I made a deduction of the $1,575 to come to the $56,025.
56,
If
okay,
you wish
so-
to,
So
I'll leave that up to the panel to run through, but I think that's fair. I know that they're not all taken up, so I think we'd be attributing slightly more income than they may actually get.
There's not a stall included.
There is. They don't pay for the parking other than what they pay in their grand scheme of things, right? So,
So whether they're used or not is really irrelevant, it's assigned, right?
it's assigned to them,
Be
yes.
part of that rent.
Yes. So, is the rental rate of $100 a month accurate? I think it probably is. That doesn't account for any, well, there's no real additional expenses as it's underground for the most part, so there's no snow clearing or any additional expenses that I can think of there. So if the panel wishes to use the full bore 57,600, you could. I would make the argument in a normal market situation, they wouldn't necessarily have full occupancy of their parking. If you look at INEs that are sent in for most market apartments, they don't necessarily operate at full 100% capacity on their parking, so a deduction of $1,500 is not inappropriate.
Oh, sorry, but if you use $100 times
48.
48 times 12, I have 57,600.
Correct. I've just explained
Take off
that.
1,500,
Yeah.
you have 56. you minus vacancy, you get, my total, when I run it all down, I get, so then I have 881,991 is the effective gross income.
So we have, let me run that again in case I did make a mistake.
I think so. Yeah, they give assessors.
So I've got 902,169 as the gross potential income. That's including the $56,025,
Okay.
deducting the vacancy, which is 21,652. Let's rerun that. Maybe I did have fat fingers there for a sec. Hold on.
Well, they give us bigger calculators, assessors, get the bigger numbers.
Yeah. You know what? You are correct, and I apologize for that. It's 885.17 is what I come to as the effective gross.
Right, so I got about 9.4 or something.
So we could make the adjustment to, is it going to be material to make the adjustment to the expense, the management expense of 5%? 61,579.
I think if you were at 9.4, it would reflect everything.
Whoa. Hold on. So the property management would change by, I've got $44,026 minus 41,369 equals, so we have an additional expense of $2,657 added to the expenses of $337,592. So we have $340,249 in expense. 885.17 less 340,249 equals 540,268 in NOI, capitalized at 5.75%, gives us a market value of $9,396,000. Inclusive of parking revenue.
That's the revised value you're
That is
putting
my
forward.
revised value, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, are you desirous of a summation on this particular property?
No, I think we should leave this to
Mr.
that.
Smith?
Still have 7 more to go.
I'm fine.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully they're more straightforward.
Should we order out for pizza? Or?
I hope not.
2 minutes?
Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. The property we'll deal with is 46 Chesterfield. When you're ready, Mr. Assessor, let's hear from you, please.
Excuse me, file number 19-1648, roll 08004230000 is 46 Chesterfield Avenue. This is the first of a bunch of Manitoba housing projects. I'm familiar with all of them, but I've never been in any of them recently. I'll put that up front. I've represented these in the past for Manitoba Housing, but it was quite a while ago. So 46 Chesterfield is, it's a mixed, there's a high-rise seniors and there's family townhouse units. And this is located Dakota, in the Dakota Village area, or St. Patel, I call it, near St. Mary's in Dakota. So, page 3, we're very close on NOI, we're like $6,000 or $7,000 apart. Ours is all model driven because, first of all, and this is, I'll go through it on this one and it's the same for the rest. These rents are all geared to income, so if you make $1,000 a month, your rent's $270. If you make $10,000 a month, it's $2,700. So once you make too much money, you move out. So Manitoba Housing, their expenses, we look at them, but usually they're not all that useful because they do a lot of block renovations. They tend to let them run down, and then they do massive renovations, more so than a typical landlord that's more of an annual stabilized repair and maintenance, I found. So anyway, we're not, like I said, our NOIs are close. The difference is cap rate. We're at 5%. That's reflected of this as being a larger project, and it's 1977. Our cutoff is 1975. Otherwise, it would be 5.3 if it was over. And well, I don't need to go through the rental comparables because they're close. And starting on page 33, I've included, we're not going to read it, but there's been criticism that Manitoba Housing doesn't have.
I'm sorry, I don't have page 33.
I don't have
Oh, they're not numbered?
Yep.
Yeah, they are, but
Nothing
that
here.
one goes to 31.
Oh. Oh, sorry.
I see where you're.
I looked at 33. It's actually page 20. Sorry. It's page 33 of the report. The bottom right-hand corner numbers. Basically, this quickly outlines that Manitoba Housing does have large pools of capital for repairs. They tend to do them in larger scale. Their budget for 15-16 was 120 million. So, and they're allotted for different areas. So they do have repair and maintenance budgets and dollars. Actually, there was a big article in the paper today about it. But anyway, that's all I want to say on that. And I would ask that you maintain our assessment of $11,974,000.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions for the assessor?
Very few, really. I think you, at the beginning there, you had mentioned in the past you had represented Manitoba Housing with regard to their appeals against the city. Is that fair?
I've done this building. That was like early 2000s.
But you had represented this
Right.
ownership in their appeals.
I worked for Crown Lands and we did I was in charge of the tax reviews for housing.
The capitalization rate that is applied for the subject, so that's, you had mentioned, there's age cutoffs, so it falls
Right.
within a certain age range and it gets the cap rate that's assigned to that.
Right.
Okay, those are all of my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitford?
No questions, thanks.
Mr. Boraski?
The risk of this being minutia, I just noticed on this page that you referred us to, page 20, and down at the bottom, it mentions work being done by contractors and social enterprise. Does that mean that the amount of work that is done to actually repair an NHRC building is something in excess of whatever is paid to general contractors? what does social enterprise mean?
Good question. They have two functions. They have repair and maintenance people, and they have construction crews. But when they have large projects like an envelope or redoing a whole building, then they tender out to private.
All right, so,
Thank you. The high-rise and the townhouse, there's no distinction between the two. They're all treated as the same. Same rates applied, same expense ratio, and same cap rate.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, we don't have a high-rise cap rate. It's just age. And our townhouse cap rates are the same, it's age.
Okay.
The size comes into factor when they're very small buildings.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith?
Yes, thank you. I was just thinking about this, I'd like to apologize to Mr. Whitbread perhaps to start with. I know I used the term minutia and perhaps that was overstating it, so I didn't mean anything by that, obviously, just turn of phrase. Looking at subject property and most of the balance of our properties here today, they are Manitoba Housing owned and operated properties. We're dealing with 46 Chesterfield Avenue here. I'm just going to address some of the information that was presented with regard to repairs and budget for repairs, etc. from Manitoba Housing. Obviously, Manitoba Housing does have a budget for maintenance of their properties, renovation when required, etc. And that's that. If they didn't have that, the properties would actually run into the ground and disintegrate. So, as a regular course of business, obviously they have to maintain their properties and they have a budget for such. Now, the way that they allocate those funds is based on need. So they look at the properties that they have and the properties that are most in need of repair and or what they term refresh, where they change some of the surfaces, flooring, cabinetry, countertops, etc., things of that nature. So, being Manitoba Housing and serving the segment of the population that they do as a public function, the wear and tear in the properties does tend to be considerably higher than in typical market apartments. So you do have properties that and this is a general overall arcing statement, that do wear down faster and have more evidence of wear and tear and damage, etc. So the budget for funding these renovations is never enough. They cannot keep up with the need for repair and refresh in their vast holdings in both the city and the province. So they obviously do their absolute best to maintain them and refresh when necessary. However, it doesn't mean that they're all refreshed and in good condition. Moving on to the subject property itself, 46 Chesterfield. We have a mix of units here. Property built in 1977. We have a tower and we have townhouse units. There's a mix of 82 bachelors, 24 one-beds. That would be the apartment tower itself, and perhaps the two-bedroom as well. And then we have the townhouses, which are 26 three-bedroom units for the subject property. The photos begin on page number 4 and onwards. This property had not been renovated or refreshed as of the valuation date. You can see the original nature of the finishes in the property, size of the bedrooms being relatively small, etc. This is fairly typical of Manitoba Housing. Again, you can see the original flooring, etc. The property, as stated, is located in St. Patel. It's north of Bishop Grandin, as you can see on my page 11, and in between Dakota and St. Mary's Road is the location for the subject. Right by my high school that I went to, directly across the road. Moving on to the valuation itself for the subject property. We have a property that would be in, as stated, in below average condition. So the rental rates that it would attract on the marketplace would be reflective of that particular condition. So we've presented the CMHC average market stats at the bottom of page number 13. We did review the City of Winnipeg's rental rate, overall average rental rate for the subject property, and it did appear to be in line with how we viewed the property as far as condition and its ability to draw rent on the market. So we are in agreement with the rental income of $1,339,221 or $211. The actual revenue that they brought in the valuation year was $575,000 roughly, just for comparison. Now, we make no reliance on that figure at all. It's simply there for reference purposes. Page 15, we use the 2.6% vacancy rate, and we are in agreement with the expense allowance for the subject property, for this particular property. Moving on to capitalization rate. Gentlemen on the panel have heard my discussion with regard to social housing and valuation of such, the experts behind it, the theory behind it, the risks that are involved in it. You don't necessarily need to hear them for sixth time this fall, I don't imagine. So unless there's anything in particular that you would like me to discuss in that regard, I'll leave it for you to review that material on page number 16 there. Again, I would point out my sale comparable number 2, please strike that out. We're doing further background research on that, and we don't want the panel to rely on that particular cap. Our cap rate evidence, again, ranges from 5.44 up to that 6.5, 6.6% range, as shown on page 16. The market stats from both Colliers and CB Richard Ellis, representative of investment grade properties, which this would not fall within, is in that low end of 5, higher end of 6%, with a relatively stable rate between the 2016 year and the 2018 year, so representative of the 2018 assessment and 2020 assessment. Colliers is indicating high-rise caps in 16 of 5 to 5.75, 5 to 6 in 2018, low rises between 5.25 and 6, and 5 to 6 in 2018. So relatively stable, as I said. CB Richard Ellis's information is on page 18, where you have high-rise B class apartments at 5 to 5.75%, low rises between 5.5 and 6% overall for A's and B's, with their stable cap rate chart on page 18. So, subject property. We have Manitoba Housing. There's obviously the issues surrounding that regarding risk. Beyond that, we have 82 bachelor units in this particular development, all of them in the tower. 82 out of 133 units. Beyond that, we have 26 three-bedroom units. So we have either end of the scale. There's less demand for those on the marketplace, less renters, more vacancy, etc. So that factors into valuation as well. So the capitalization rate that we have applied to the subject, as shown on page number 19, is 6.25%. And the the summary of our valuation and the city's valuation is on page 19. So using our NOI of $605,583, capped at 6.25%, we arrive at a market value of $9,689,000. Looking at cap rate, again, just intuitively, looking at a public housing property on the marketplace and all of the issues surrounding that, when we have an investment grade range of roughly 5 to 6% overall. Is it going to be at the 5% at the bottom end of that range? Certainly not. It would not draw it would not draw a capitalization rate representative of the better properties on the market. It would fall towards or above the other end of the range, that being 6%. We're at 6.25%. Again, keep in mind, significant number of bachelors, 82 out of 133, and then 26 3-bedrooms. So we're well over 100 units out of 133 of non-standard market apartments. The addendum material is there for you to review, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, any questions for the applicant?
No questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Mr. Borisky?
No questions.
Just a minor question, the roof lease income, what is that? Is that a signage or a tower or?
It's a tower, yeah. So as it's there and in place, we reflected it in our valuation. Now, there's a couple of towers in that area that, you know, they could move to, but it is there currently, so we've reflected it in our value.
Okay, and then you just use the expense allowance percentage rather than an expense allowance dollar figure. You've applied the 54.1% to that additional income as well. To the effect of gross, yeah. Okay.
Yes, I mean, there, yes.
Chances are there wouldn't be that same sort of expense for a rental on the roof, but
Not necessarily, that's a fair point. There would be some, but probably not the same degree. However, we've not obviously applied any vacancy rate to the roof lease income.
right. Thank you. Desire for summation, either party?
No
Mr.
thanks.
Lucky?
No.
Mr. Smith?
No thanks.
Just a point to clarify, on your application, you had 3 points of appeal, and
Yeah, we've
you said
removed
you're
that.
withdrawing the liability and classification?
Yes, we are.
Okay, do you mind signing this one?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And we would have that for 170 Hampton as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Assessor, we'll deal with 65 South Park Drive next, please.
Thank you. Excuse me. File number 19-3331, roll number 0306306900. We have a Manitoba housing property located at 65 South Park Drive, which is South Park runs off of Pembina, across Pembina from the old Southwood Golf Club. I think there's some, it's along the new rapid transit, and it would be somewhat behind the retail there. I'm not sure which exactly ones, but there's Safeways and Winners and whatnot. I think I've spent half my life sitting in the Winners parking lot. But, anyway, We have more of a typical apartment block here. This one was built in 1985. It's a 3-story. And if you go to page 3, it shows the mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms, which is ideal, especially being near the university. Our overall rent would be low for that kind of mix at $1,149. That's includes all income, laundry, parking, and rent. And we, I won't get into it as we agree on NOI, and being a fairly modern building, our cap rate of 5% I think is very appropriate. I would ask that you maintain the assessment of $4,377,000, which is about $132,636 per unit. And I have some pictures here. I don't have them numbered, but you have what I said. It's more or less a typical rental apartment that would be representative of the market, and I would ask that you maintain our assessment.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Smith?
I have no questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
I have no questions.
Mr. Boreski?
No questions.
I have nothing further. Thank you. We go on the assumption that there's no summations required. If there is, you'll let me know.
Well, I haven't spoken yet, but yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Not a problem. So 65 South Park Drive, as mentioned, it is in the Fort Richmond area, essentially. If you look at my page number 9, you can see the location of the subject on South Park. As described, it's between the rail tracks to the west and the highway on the right. You have the retail component out there. So what, I'll keep your eyes on that page for a minute. The rapid transit corridor, as it functions now, runs down the rail corridor essentially and cuts across onto South Park Drive, across Pembina Highway, and then you can't actually see it on my aerial there as it's not updated to that degree, but there's now a route that takes it through the old golf course to the Investors Field location. So the consequence of this, twofold. There's an awful lot of buses that run down South Park Drive now. There were no buses previously that were running down here. Now we have, I believe, in excess of 100 a day that are passing the subject. It hasn't improved their access to transit, as their bus stop has not changed. It's still on Pembina Highway, so you still have to walk to the bus. It's not immediately outside in an upgraded platform or anything of that nature. You simply have more buses traveling past the location. So an awful lot more traffic, an awful lot more noise from this change to the area. So it's essentially an external issue that would have an impact potentially with regard to the desirability of the property, such as that. Now, we're not in dispute with regard to the income and or expense information for the subject. We're in agreement on NOI. It's simply something that I'm pointing out. It's a fairly dramatic shift in the environment of that particular property. The photos of the property are shown on pages 4 and 5 forwards as described. We have 33 total units. I I wouldn't say it's necessarily a typical property on the market, it's more typical. But instead of 1 and 2 bedrooms, we have 2 and 3 bedrooms. So we have 18 twos, which is positive, and we have 15 3-bedroom units. Now, housing builds these obviously to accommodate families. The 3-bedroom issue on the marketplace is there does tend to be lower take-up of those greater vacancy. Now, I understand where it is, it's close to the university, et cetera, so I'm not going to quibble on that point. Subject property has not had renovation or refresh since its original build date of 1985. I am going to make an adjustment to our final market value. I'll take you to my page number 17. And looking at the summary here, we come down to an NOI matches the city, 218,852. I'm going to adjust my capitalization rate for the subject down to 6%. We're not dealing with 88 out of 133 units being bachelor plus 3 bedrooms here. We're looking at 2 and 3 bedrooms, roughly equal mix. And the property is somewhat newer than the one that we were looking at previously. So applying a 6% cap will give us a final market value of $3,648,000. And I'm open for questions.
I thank you. Mr. Lucky, questions for you?
So, I'm just wondering, so the other one was in 1970, okay, no, that's fine, I have no questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
No questions, thanks.
Mr. Brodsky? Second. Anything further? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Sorry for jumping the gun there.
That's all right.
Next property we'll deal with is 1010 Markham. When you're ready, Mr. Assessor, hear from you, please.
Uh, 1010 Markham is file number 19-1767, roll number 03062909200. 1010 Markham Road. We have a 1979 3-story building. There's 30 suites. Again, when, well, this one is 21 2-bedroom units, and it's in the same general area as the previous one. Markham is just a street or two over from the other one. So in the university area, the our NOI is actually lower by $3,000, and the difference is cap rate. So anyway, I would ask, again, this is a typical apartment in a good rental area. I would ask that you maintain our 5 cap and assessment of $3,850,000.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions for the assessor?
I have no questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
No questions, thanks.
Mr. Brodsky?
Oh, just a simple one. The last property was 1985. You had the 5% on that, I think, as well. This is 1979. Is there a break point somewhere?
75.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have nothing further. Mr. Smith, we'll hear from you.
Thank you. So 1010 Markham Road, location. If you turn to my page 9, you can see the aerial map aerial photograph of the subject, so it is in that same area as the last property. To the west of Pembina Highway, adjacent to the rail tracks, and indeed, this is right on the rail tracks. If you can see on the site plan on page number 8, the tracks are immediately to the west of that, as is the rapid transit corridor, so it's going to run right past these particular units, and again, you have that exact same issue with regard to the increased traffic and obviously the noise from all of the buses going past, and it's not an insignificant number. I believe I had heard something in the order of over 100 buses per day transferring past, in addition to the CPR tracks being right there, this being a main line. So in terms of location, yes, it's close to the U of M. Do you necessarily want to be right adjacent to the rail tracks and the rapid transit corridor if you have other options? And no, probably not. So that would certainly be taken into account in tenants' minds in looking at a property such as this. Looking at property as a whole, page 3, built in 1979, again, Manitoba housing, not publicly administered social housing. 30 total units, 21 of them being 2 beds and 9 being 3 beds. The photos are shown on the following pages. It has not had a refresh since the date of construction. And again, I'll just point out, in terms of build out, when housing builds their properties, they're seeking to accommodate the most people they can, and they provide a basic nature of accommodation. So the surfaces that they put in are not luxury, and they're intended to last for a period of time. They don't necessarily last for a period of time due to wear and tear, but the level of finish is below what one would typically experience in the market. So looking at our valuation for the subject, we are in agreement with the city with regard to the net operating income. I believe that we arrived at, actually I have included the reported laundry revenue and or parking, whichever it was, in our valuation. So that increases the NOI to $195,436 in our valuation. I won't speak again to cap rate. I will trust that the panel members will keep in mind my comments earlier and comments from past hearings that we've been involved in, unless we need to hear that material again. In the interest of time, I'm going to try and be efficient and not cover that twice. Happy to cover it, in that I certainly want the panel members to recall that detail, but I won't go through it in the interest of saving us a bit of time here. So our final valuation is shown on page number 17. This property, yes, well located in Fort Richmond, poorly located against the rail tracks and rapid transit. It has 2 bedrooms, that's a plus. It also has 3 bedrooms, that's not typically a plus on the marketplace. The surface finishes, etc., are going to be below par, below average, certainly overall. So the cap rate that we have applied to the subject is 6%, which gives us our final market value of $3,257,000. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, questions for the applicant?
Well, I have one question. This discussion on buses going by, affecting, are you saying that affects the cap rate?
Well, what I'm saying with the rapid transit corridor going immediately past it is that obviously that has creates a sound issue for properties that are located immediately adjacent to that. beyond that, it's right on the rail track, so the location is an issue with regard to the value of a property, and we are taking that into account.
So apartment buildings that are on Portage Avenue, would get more buses than here. Is there any evidence that Portage Avenue building cap rates are higher than buildings not on Portage Avenue?
Well, so 2 points to that. I don't necessarily know that there would be more buses. This is the rapid transit corridor going straight to the U of M, so there's going to be an awful lot of buses going past this. In fact, I discussed it with another appellant, and they had the exact figure that are anticipated, which is very high. Portage Avenue does not have a main rail line that runs down it either.
I've never seen a train on there, have you? Or-
I absolutely have. I get stopped by them
Oh, okay.
going over to Bison Butte.
Anyway, so you don't have any evidence that apartment buildings on major arteries with lots of buses have cap rates higher than ones that aren't on major arteries?
That's your question?
Yes.
I have no evidence to show you
Okay,
today
thank
with
you.
regard to that, but the comments remain.
That was your question, Mr. Lucky?
That's it.
Mr. Whitbread?
I'm fine, thank you, no questions.
Mr. Preston? Just one minor point on page 17 you've included. You said laundry could be parking, you weren't sure which it was, but I noticed that you've maintained the expense allowance that the assessor used, so in this case, you didn't allow any more expenses for that income? Whereas in the past one, you did allow some expenses for the rooftop.
I did not adjust the expenses upward, no, and I mean, the revenue is relatively small,
Right.
at just under $3,000.
Okay, thank you. We can move on to 2339 Pembina, when you're ready, Mr. Assessor.
2339 Pembina is file number 19-3256, roll 03062919200. This is I changed it to townhouse project. There's townhouses and there's apartments. It looked like it was predominantly more townhouses. Anyway, by doing so, I didn't change the cap rate, but it maybe affected the expenses. And so my recommendation is to reduce it from the 6,864,000 to 6,154,000. Anyway, this property was built in 1973, which gives us the slightly higher, or the higher cap rate of 5.3. I guess we're on page 3 now. Use model here. Like, as I said, 5.3 cap, market vacancy. We're very close on NOI. We're at 326, 157. Mr. Smith is at 329, 302. The difference being cap rate again. Anyway,
Mr. Smith, were you aware of this recommendation coming into the hearing?
Just in reviewing it this morning, I saw it for the first time. I'd like to thank Mr. Lucky for recognizing that change was appropriate and instituting that.
You'd like to continue on?
Okay, so just to clarify, so the rental income, the adjusted rent that you come to is $718,350 in total, I guess? I think that's what I calculated.
Okay.
And then your final NOI is I think you said 326,157?
Right.
Combining the two? Okay, so we're
Within
very
a,
close
within a
in-
couple
in
thousand.
NOI, okay. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. Boraski?
Sorry, just a clarification on the last, comment on the net operating income of how much?
Our total, when you add these two together, is 326,157.
That's all.
And the 5.3 is because of your break point in 1970?
It's right at the top end under it, 1974 is the last 5.3.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, here for you, please.
All right, 2339 Pembina Highway. Property is owned by Manitoba Housing, built in 1973. And we have a total of 50 units at the subject. 15 2-beds, 33 beds, 1 4-bedroom, and 2 5-bedroom units for a total of 50 units. Certainly skews towards the higher bed count of 3 bedrooms and up. We have 33 out of 50 units being 3+ bedrooms in the marketplace. The location of the subject property is shown on page number 9. And 10. As you can see there, the property is largely townhouses with a certain degree of 2-bedroom units in a more standard apartment setting. The build out of the property, built again in that 1973 year, has not been refreshed, and this particular property is, I would term, well below average in terms of condition. You can see the photographs to that evidence. We did obviously inspect the property, and the photos that we're showing you here are pretty indicative of the wear and tear that was present in the property overall, both in the apartment as well as the townhomes. So you can see townhome, or rather apartment, is shown on page number 8. We have obviously damage occurring to new flooring in that particular unit as well. Most, if not all units have the original flooring, original cabinetry, etc., except where there was damage where something would need to be replaced. So your condition and the basic nature of it is, again, would put these units well below average in the marketplace. Looking at income, we end up very similar in terms of NOI, so I'm not going to go through it in detail. We looked at CMHC averages, and we applied a rent that we felt was appropriate for the 4 and 5 bedrooms. There's no information on those through CMHC. we used a deduction from the market average for condition and size of the units, et cetera. So we come to a very similar gross income to the city. The expense allowance that we have used for the subject property is the same as the city at 53.48%. We felt that that was an appropriate level for the subject. The expenses for the property are included for you to review. Looking at capitalization rate, if we flip to page number 18 in the comparison page, again, we're looking at a property that is dominantly 3+ bedrooms, so we have 33 out of 50 units being 3+ bedrooms. Again, this is non-standard on the marketplace. We have units that are in of a basic nature to start with, that are in certainly very worn condition and would be well below average on the marketplace. So taking all of those factors into account, as well as my other commentary that we're not going to discuss, I've used a cap rate of 6.5% for the subject property, giving us a market value of $5,066,000.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, questions for the applicant?
No.
Mr. Whitbread?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Prosky? Just one minor one here. I noticed your parking income, you did use the percentage expenses in this particular case, so not exactly consistent with last time. Minor point.
I take your point.
Does anyone need a short break at this point, or can we carry on? We're okay?
Fine.
So, Mr. Assessor, next one we'll deal with is 25 Galen Place. When you're ready, please.
Thank you. File number 19-1747, roll 0306-430-7900, oh, excuse me, 25 Galen Place, Manitoba Housing, brick, 1970, two-story, 54 units. We have 15 one-bedrooms, 36 two-bedrooms. Again, we're very close on NOI, the difference being cap rate. This is a quiet, well, it's a cul-de-sac. At about, actually, if we keep paging through, sorry, the pages aren't numbered. It shows Pembina and Chancellor. And this is Galen Place runs off of Chancellor. And there's townhouses, and then beyond the townhouses is the Bishop Brandon. So we're not backing on railway tracks or rapid transit. And it's typical brick apartment block. Actually, actually, right after the two pictures, I included the sale. The transfer date is May, but sale occurred prior to that, so it would have been a reference a sale of a mid-rise across the street, Manitoba Housing to Sam Management, and that sold for $126,000 a unit. And our assessment of $4,983,000 is $92,277 a unit. So I would ask that we maintain this assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions for the assessor?
I have no questions.
Mr. Whitbrook?
No questions.
Mr. Bresky?
No questions.
Good, thank you.
All right, 25 Galen Place, owned and operated by Manitoba Housing, built in 1970, and we have a total of 54 units. It's broken out into 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, as shown on page number 3. The photographs of the property follow from page 4 through 7 likely. You can see some exteriors. Again, the original nature of the interiors with the original flooring, cabinetry, bathroom surfaces, etc. Very standard. If you look at the bottom of page number 7, you can see the interior of the hallway. Again, very institutional in nature. This is the level of build out that was done by Manitoba Housing to suit the basic nature of accommodation needs that they were seeking to provide to the public. So if you look at that in comparison to the standard market, you're going to typically find a somewhat better level of finish overall. Location is shown on page number 9, as Mr. Lucky had mentioned, that is where it is located. Again, in Fort Ferry area, just to the west of Pembina Highway. With regard to the valuation of the subject, again, we did review the income level projected for the property. As these are rent geared to income, we can't rely on income in place, so we need to assign a fair level of income and expenses to these properties. We felt that the income attributed to the property by the city was fair, so we have used that as well. To that, we have added the parking revenue, and our vacancy rate also mirrors the city at 2.4%, as does the expense allowance at 53.48%. Our final NOI comes to $267,454, and I'm going to make a slight adjustment to my final value. I'd like to adjust the cap rate downwards from 6.25% to 6%, in keeping with our other valuations today. I feel that for the subject property, given the suite mix, etc. of the subject, that a 6% cap rate would be more in line with both our other valuations and with the marketplace as well. So using a 6% cap rate gives us a final market value of $4,458,000. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, questions?
No questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
No questions.
Mr. Bresky?
I'm on a roll. No questions.
Nor do I. Thank you. Okay, we're going to deal next with 170 Hendon, in keeping with the MHRC properties. So when you're ready, Mr. Assessor.
File number 19-1750. We have roll number 010009200800. This property is located 170 Hendon Avenue. It's right next to what used to be the Charleswood Hotel, now is a Co-op gas bar on the north side of 70 property there. This is a senior's high-rise, built in 1973. On page 3, we agree on the NOI of 475,103, and difference being cap rate. I would ask that you maintain our assessment of $8,964,000, which is, well, it's only 59,364 a unit. So we have this would be, we rate all the buildings, this would be at poor, this would be at our lowest level of model that we would have. Anyway, I would ask that you maintain the assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
No, I have no questions.
Mr. Whitford?
No, I don't, thanks.
Well, just on your last point, when you're making reference to the poor quality, is that the condition that it is in or the construction on it, or both?
No, the construction's fine. It's a solid concrete. These things are built like solid concrete. There's curtain walls. They're really well built.
Okay.
But I can't comment on the condition, but what we do is we can lower the value by lowering the, we call it quality level, but it's not necessarily quality of the building. It's, if we keep getting it reduced and the assessment we can't maintain it, then we lower the quality. So we hit this as hard as we can, that's what I'm trying to get at, although it is a solid concrete high-rise building.
Thank you.
I have nothing, thank you. Mr. Smith? There from you, please.
Okay, so 170 Hendon Avenue, again, Manitoba housing property, built in 1973. We had some information that was meant to be included in the brief, but I see that it wasn't, so I'm just going to verbally mention it to you. This particular property has significant criminal and social issues. I'm reading from an article here with specifically regarding this particular property from CBC. It's entitled, and this is the title, I'm not meaning to exaggerate, it says, "It's a nightmare. Manitoba housing residents move out of Charleswood building." If you read into the text, the man had been there for 4 years and he'd had enough and left. Resident says there are major issues with drugs, prostitution, and violence in the building. He'd been assaulted several times, et cetera, et cetera. That's one resident reporting. I'm not gonna go into the rest of it, and I know that it wasn't included in your brief. That's one thing. There's a second article where a man was attacked with a machete in 170 Hendon. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's going to get attacked by living there, but these are not normal circumstances. In serving the population that they do, which tends to be obviously a lower socioeconomic cohort of the public, you do tend to have more of these issues that crop up. And with this particular building, they seem to be more exaggerated than normal. So when you look at the location of the property being in Charleswood, that's certainly balanced by the other issues that are attached to the property itself. So just some background information for you. With regard to the subject property itself, built in 1973, 151 units, and in this case, we're looking at one of the properties where Manitoba Housing has built a great degree of bachelor units into their construction. So we have 129 bachelor units out of 151 units, so the vast majority of the units are bachelors. We then have 21 one-beds and 1 two-bed, which is probably the caretaker, I imagine, for the property. So they're essentially serving the single occupant marketplace with bachelors and one-beds. That's the cohort of the population that was being targeted. Manitoba Housing, of course, is providing service of providing housing to those that need, and that particular market segment is one that they do serve and that is in demand for them. On the marketplace, not so much. Bachelor units are much less prized, and you would not see a normal market apartment building out 129 with 151 units as bachelor units. Property photos are shown inside. Overall, it would be in below average condition. The site is shown on page number 9 in that Charleswood area. And we can move on to the valuation for the subject. We are not in disagreement with the city with regard to the level of income and expense attributed to the subject. When we reviewed the information, we felt that it was appropriate to the level of the subject. We have an average rent of $623. That certainly seems appropriate for the subject. So our final NOI comes to $475,103. Looking at the subject, we have property, yes, it's concrete, so it was well constructed in the first place. It is in below average condition. You have vast majority of bachelor units in the subject, as well as all the other details with regard to purchase of public housing that we have discussed in the past and are in the text on my page 17 as well as others. We have applied a cap rate of 6.5% to the subject property, which gives us our market value of $7,309,000. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, questions for the applicant?
The articles you read, when are they from?
They ranged in age, actually. One was May of 2016, and the other one was earlier in the 2000s, 2003.
2003.
Yes, but I mean, the point is not the date that somebody was attacked with a machete, it's that they were attacked with a machete, more so.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, is there anything current, like once they put the guy with the machete in jail?
Well, so the point of this is, and I don't seek these out or anything of that nature. This particular property is problematic. So the fact that one was in 2003 they don't write an article on every incident that occurs there. So it's an ongoing problem.
But it's one that could be corrected.
Challenging, but yes.
Great. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Woodruff?
No questions.
Mr. Foresti?
I have none, thank you.
Before we move on to the last property, is there a desire for a summation on the grouping of MHRC properties perhaps? No?
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Last item is 170 Hamden. I see there's a preliminary issue with this, Mr. Assessor, is that correct?
We're seeking non-compliance. There's,
Okay, would you give us your presentation regarding that then, please? Maybe you could start by reading the file
sure.
number and the roll number, and then give us
Okay.
your evidence for the
Uh,
request.
File 194334, roll number 120-130-41000, 499 Osborne Street. I honestly don't know. This property, I believe, was either owned or managed by Wind Park Dorchester in the past, I think. And if you look at, on page 2, the last return we ever got was 2010. There's, I remember that pages, thank God. Page 14 and 15, if you could just tear them out. I left the names of the tenants, or at least disregard them. That's a more current, there's a rent, a 2018 return, so post-reference. We're trying to come to some sort of handle on what the actual income and expenses were. There is some correspondence from Wind Park Dorchester about upgrading of the property. On page, looks like it starts about 19.
And is this pertinent to your request?
I'm getting to it, sorry. So we looked for ownership. There was an owner, Daniel Orlico, which I know he's deceased, just because I knew of the person. And then on page 28, we get to some tracking information. No idea who signed for it. This is a lot of renovation work that was done. Some Kijiji information. And then when we get to page 52, there was a return sent to Manitoba Limited, 240 St. Anne's Road. And then page 55, sent it out, it was returned to sender. Armor Properties is the new owner. There's a whole bunch of sketchy stuff, I honestly don't know what went where, but there hasn't been a return since 2010.
Mr. Smith? Questions or concerns regarding what the assessor has stated?
Just in reading through it and just, it is somewhat confusing, as Mr. Lucky mentioned, Daniel Orlico is deceased. Property is owned by the numbered company as indicated, and it appears that the request for information was sent to the wrong address. If you look at page number 52, it's going to 246 St. Anne's Road. And if you flip onwards to page number 55, and I'm not quite sure what this page is. Oh, it says there's a bit of a scan on the left-hand side there, property income and expense questionnaire. Form dash dash dash, there's writing on that particular envelope stating it should go to Armor Property Management, who would have been the property manager for the project in that April 1, 2018 timeframe, however, or when this notice would have come out. They did not manage it in 2017 though, as they did not have the information for the property for that timeframe, and I know that they started it subsequent to the 2017 year. So it appears that notice went to a prior property management firm for the property. That's all of the background that I have.
Just give me one second.
Not
So,
sure if there's any other detail in there that would help us out.
All right, that you have nothing further to present of your own, no, you're just relying on what's been presented by the assessor, and
Well-
your statement is,
50, my statement is that the property management for the property as of the time that the income and expense questionnaire would be mailed out was Armor Property Management, and they're located at, I think it's 57 Myrtle Street. It's Myrtle anyway, I can't remember the number, but that's where they're located. And the notice was sent to an address on St. Anne's Road, 246 St. Anne's Road.
On page 23, there's authorization from Winnipeg Dorchester that Dan Orlico authorizes Winnipeg Dorchester to do on his behalf.
Right.
Somewhere there was,
Can I interject there, Mr. Lucky?
okay.
I'm just reading that same page, and that's from May of 2011 for the Winnipeg Dorchester authorization.
Right, when returns stopped coming.
Right. There's, I think, were some well-publicized issues with Winnipeg Dorchester.
Right.
excuse me,
I have no further information.
no, and there's nothing further you can add, Mr. Lucky?
Sorry, just give me 1 second here. I thought there was. So we got a rent roll by email in 15. I requested it. bear with me for 2 seconds more. I have nothing further to add.
Okay, I'm going to put it to the panel. Mr. Whitbread, did you have any questions of either of the parties regarding this issue?
Only this to confirm Mr. Smith's comment. If you were to connect with Armor Management on Myrtle, you would
We
clear
did.
up all issues. There's nothing here that indicates that.
Right, we sent them an email on page. Page was that we got the 2015 roll, rent roll by email.
Sorry, you said 2015?
I saw 2018 in here.
Oh, there's the 15.
I think it was on, oh, I just saw it. 2035, page 35. Is that right, Mr. Lucky?
Right, our assessor, as a result of the permit, sent a request for information because we didn't have any information to Armor in 2015. And we still never got any returns since.
Which begs the question, once you know that it's Armor Management at 56 Myrtle, why would you not have sent a request for the INEs to Armor Management at 56 Myrtle?
Well, the assessor would have, based on the permit, the owner's still, and at that time, still shown as 246 St. Anne's Road. Nobody changed the owner. Address for service.
So the address for service
But he was,
is sending out the assessment notice and tax bill would have gone to the same place you sent.
everything, right, the taxes were paid. But nobody changed the address for service. We requested information in 15 from the people that managed it at that time.
And your page 55, this does not pertain to the request for information for 2017, is that correct? Where it says should go to Armor Park Management. This is a subsequent request?
I can't read the
No,
date
I
on it.
can't either. Oh, looks like it's April 24th and 19th.
Yeah, it's the most recent.
So that's subsequent to your request for the 17th.
There's a 15 information.
I'm looking at page 13. I know it's after the reference date, but it includes a reference date from Armor Management for the year of 2018. Would that not cue someone to get in touch with Armor Management? Them thinking they had complied, I would assume they think they've complied. And so the onus would be on the city, would it not, to contact Armor Management and say, what's up, folks?
The onus is on the owner to change their address for service.
But I would maybe think that this is giving you the information you need. If I was filing.
This is for the next reassessment. This is,
This is after.
I don't know who, since it would appear, I didn't search the numbered company, but at some point, Mr. Orlico owned it and passed away fairly recently. But I don't know if it was ever transferred. And like I said, Wind Park Dorchester took it over in 10, I think we discussed, and we never got a return since.
But we know that Armor Management owns and manages thousands of units in the city.
We don't know that they own this.
I didn't say they own this, they own thousands
Sure.
of units. One 5-minute phone call, would that not clear it up perhaps? I know you have a lot of work to do.
Well,
But-
like,
You're bringing this.
somebody that's paying the taxes is getting the tax bill and also getting these returns. So they're paying the tax bill and throwing away the returns and not changing the address for service. They come together, they go to the same place,
I got it.
yeah.
But you want a solution to this problem, or a challenge, I would
Yeah, we
imagine.
would.
Yeah.
And the only way that we ever seem to, well, I don't know, I think there's a whole bunch of circumstances here that I don't think anybody in this room can answer, self-included.
I have no further questions.
Given that last statement, I have no questions.
Okay. We will briefly adjourn. Okay, I'll call the hearing back to order. And with much deliberation and discussion, we have made the decision that we are going to grant the assessor's request, and therefore the onus will be shifted to the applicant. So we'll hear from you first, please, Mr. Smith.
All right. So for 499 Osborne Street, built originally in 1974. It's an 11-unit building, 8 of those being 1-bedrooms and 3 of them being bachelor units. As noted in the city's material, there was some renovation done to the property earlier in the decade, and you can see some evidence of that in the interior photos that we have of the property on pages 4, 5, and 6. So there has been an upgrade at some point there. The issue with regard to the income and expense information, again, we did not have access to 2017 information for the subject property, nor did Armor Management. They would have supplied it to us had they had it. So in order to arrive at a fair valuation for the property, we are looking at the 2018 information, as I believe the city has included that as well in their package. So if we look at my page number 10, I've given you a breakdown of the rents for the property. They range between $870 and $906, which gives us a scheduled rent of $114,300 at 100% occupancy. Less discounted rent gives us $113,811. It's relatively common in the marketplace these days, in a competitive marketplace, that there's a discount applied to rent in order to attract tenants. So that is the case for the subject property as well. Bottom of page 10, just a note again, obviously property is covered under the Residential Tenancies Act, which is run by the RTB, Residential Tenancies Branch, and there are standard guidelines with regard to any increases. So these rents are as of year-end 2018. Certainly there would be no increase beyond that, and in fact they might be slightly lower as of the end of 2017. Moving on, page 11, we included the parking revenue for the subject property of $1,915. We've attributed a vacancy rate of 2.6% for the subject property. Their actual vacancy rate, well, I don't have the vacancy rate, but their vacancy figure for the property at the year end 2018 was $7,571, roughly double what the vacancy allowance is at 2.6%. We're not asking for an increase in vacancy for the subject, merely pointing out that for that time frame, they were well above the 2.6% vacancy. Expense allowance, 2018 year, their expenses came to $55,113. We have no additional information or prior information for the subject, so we're using that in our valuation. Capitalization rate, we have obviously the same information as we've discussed. We're not dealing with a social housing situation here. We also have a property that has already been renovated and is receiving the rents that are appropriate to the renovated state of the building. So we don't see an upside for the property there. Looking at our evidence and the market evidence that we get from the main commercial brokerages and their reports, we have a general range of 5 to 6% overall for low-rise apartments. Subject property, it's well located on the South Osborne Strip. It has already been renovated, and so we would see it being towards the bottom end of that range. It's relatively small at 11 units. Balancing that, we have 3 bachelor units, which are, I believe, the basement units that are present in the block. We've used a cap rate of 5.25%, and this gives us our market value of $1,106,000. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, questions for the applicant?
No questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
No questions, thanks.
Mr. Koreski?
No question.
Just clarification, your vacancy rate of 2.6, that was from this chart on page 11? Is that what you determined it to be?
If you look at the chart, one bedrooms were 2.7% in that area. It's dominantly one bedrooms, so we used the 2.6. It also has bachelors, which were slightly lower than that in that particular area.
Okay, and you relied on the 2018 information, albeit some of it post-reference, simply because you didn't have access to
That's
others?
correct. We had no other means of valuing the property, and that was the most site-specific, obviously, so.
Right, and did you test the market rent against the market to see?
We did look at the market, and it appeared to be in line with it.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, come here from you, please.
File number 19-4334, roll number 12013041000, 499 Osborne. 1955 building, given an effective age of 1974. That's just under the jump of cap rates of 75. I would say that when we did the model, or we did the assessment, it looks like it's been adjusted, because we don't have a 45% exactly expense ratio. So somebody made some sort of analysis which is very close to Mr. Smith's. I would agree with his 58,000. Our cap rate of 5.1 would give $1,138,000, so we're really close all the way around, whatever discretion or decision you make is fine with me. The cap rate would, if the building was bigger, it would be 5.3, but what I was getting to before is as the buildings get smaller, the cap rates get lower. They go all the way down to about 4.1 or 3, I forget. So that's why this is below 5.3. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
You just answered my question, so I have no further questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
Nothing?
Mr. Barsky? The 1974 effective year, was that a calculated
Somebody used this.
effective year, or was it just an observed?
It would have been observed. Somebody that, the person, the information's in there, the person that did, looked at the permits and made adjustments for all the renovations, probably decided that it wasn't worth stepping it up to the next cap rate.
I see, so in 1975 would have put it to
5.
to
Well, actually even below 5 because of the size.
Okay,
If it was a bigger building, it would be 5 and 5.3. The smaller buildings, the cap rates are lower.
so this 5.1 is in that age category, and then it's also the location and the size that are the primary?
Just the size.
I thank you.
Thank you.
Desire for summation, Mr. Smith?
No. Extremely brief. Property is for sale at a remarkably similar value. And that's my only summation.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, desire for summation?
No, thank you.
Okay, I thank you both for your presentations today then. I will call the hearing to a close. Orders will be up in due course.